last night after they went to bed, we were talking about Jake. Jake is, for those that haven't been following closely and don't know, and Jake's mama is actually on the line right now also. So thank you, Aisha, for being here with us and for caring about your dog so much to go to these extents. Because that really is, what she's done. She has been willing to bring her dog. She lives in New York. She brought her dog all the way out to San Diego, brought him all the way to the Sama Dog house to have Jake stay here for a while with us to work on his balance. And what does he need? What is he doing? He's been, ever since he met her, his mama, that is, he has been super overly reactive to her, to everything about her. So we're doing a lot of conversation as well on the human side of things, let's say human only, where we're talking about, what is it that Jake's trying to say, and why are these little teachers brought into our life at a certain time in a certain way, where sometimes they push us to a certain place that we may not have been otherwise until we meet them. And that's definitely what's going on with the two of them. So we've had a lot of conversations about the human side of this. And now we're going to be talking about the dog side of this, Jake's side of this, and how can we help his behaviors that are so triggered. So what is he doing? He'll do different things. Like I was sharing with Zoe last night, that he'll be just sitting on the couch and he'll want attention. You'll tell him like he can come up on the couch, but instead he'll just sit there and bark at you with this very shrill, high-pitched, very intense bark. And you can't really get him to stop. The more you engage with him, the more he barks at you. And so Zoe was already teaching me just the initial engagement, what to do there. So she taught me some great pointers, and I'll just let you share, Zoe, what those were, because already in less than 24 hours, they've been very helpful. So yeah, just send that. Maybe you want to make a little summary of what you shared with me.
Yeah. So, when you first kind of came to me with Jake's issue, you kind of defined it as an excessive barking issue. And so we talked a little bit, and I was able to get an idea of the exact circumstance in which the barking was happening so that we could determine the motivation behind the barking. So I can't fix an issue if I don't have some sort of an idea of what the underlying cause is. So we talked about it. And when you described that particular scenario, it became clear to me that this was attention barking, which is a certain kind of, just a certain form of excessive barking. So when it comes to excess or attention barking, the motivation is pretty clear. It's right in the name. It's to get your attention. And so when you know what the motivation is behind a behavior for a dog, it's so much easier to manipulate the behavior by increasing or decreasing the thing that's motivating them. So in this case, it was what he wants the most in this particular situation is your attention. And he was using his voice to get the attention. And ignoring a dog when they're barking is very difficult because it's in our nature that when a sudden kind of loud noise happens, that we look at that thing. It's almost an instinct. But even that small amount of attention given for that behavior can exacerbate the behavior, or in another way of saying it, reinforce that behavior because it worked. We essentially gave the dog just exactly what they wanted. It would be the same if a dog was very food motivated and they would bark for food, that they bark and we immediately toss a treat on the ground. That's definitely how you're going to increase the barking. So for a dog like Jake, you would want to decrease the attention for the behavior that you're trying to eliminate. So every time, what I suggested to you is that every time Jake barked, that he get a timeout, which is a separation from you. And there are multiple ways, we didn't even have to talk about this, but there's multiple ways of giving the timeout. There's the dog going into a timeout, and then there's you leaving the room. And both of them tend to be quite effective. What we decided to work on with Jake was him going into a timeout and kind of see how that works. So we popped a leash on Jake, and the second that he barked, it was a nope, I don't like that. Walk him straight into, I suggested, a bathroom, shut the door, and the timeout should be a pretty small amount of time. So just like with toddlers, the timeout doesn't need to be a long period of time because actually it gets confusing for them if it's not a quick response. And if they aren't given an opportunity to try again in a short period of time. So He gets a 15 to 30-second timeout. Then he's allowed to come back out. We sit back down on the couch and we try it again. Meanwhile, another thing that we kind of talked about was trying to find the moment when we could reward him for behavior we do want. And in Jake's situation, that takes a minute to think about what behavior do we want? What would we prefer that he do instead? And we're trying to decrease the neediness, right? So therefore, what's the opposite of a needy dog? An independent, confident dog. So we're trying to then reward independent, confident behavior. Obviously, it's a lot easier if you're rewarding that consistently throughout the dog's life and you're reinforcing it and teaching him how to be a confident, independent dog. But you can still work on it in that exact moment too, by waiting for him to either sit there quietly. That would be the bottom kind of absolute minimum that we need, or even better, waiting for him to kind of give up staring at you and just go, all right, fine. And either lay down or turn and walk away, go engage something else like a toy, or, just relax. And that would be the moment that I would immediately go give my dog attention. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the synopsis of what we tried with Jake. And I know we talked about some other things. I didn't know if you want me to go dive right in.
Yeah, I just want to say one question so far is that I guess, well, first of all, I didn't realize, as maybe some of our viewers too, didn't realize that the timeout should be so short. Mm-hmm. That's very important to know. I'm understanding through you better and better of how short the timing with dogs is key. And that quickness of the reaction of not reaction, but our response, I should say. Yeah. And the quickness of just showing them the proper way is all very relatively small. So, being on your toes with this training is really good. So then my other question is, when he turns and so he's staring at me, barking, now he's, stopped, he's being good, he turns away. My thought or confusion, I guess, is if I reward him when he turns away, immediately I've got his attention back. It doesn't teach him to just keep his attention on me longer.
So it can. It does depend. So that's a great question. It does depend on the dog and how insanely needy they are. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is best to actually allow the behavior to be self-rewarding. Is that if you are practicing independence, you are going to feel better in your body, and that might be good enough. You could even toss a food on the ground. So it's not necessarily you going over giving affection, but there's still a reward kind of happening for that. Mm-hmm. With a lot of dogs, it depends on the level of neediness. With a lot of dogs, they will, if it's repeated consistently enough, they will start to go, oh, the sooner I get my butt over there and lay down, the sooner I'm going to get what I want. And they'll get to that faster. So that you're creating that more space, and you don't necessarily have to give once they start doing that more automatically, you don't necessarily have to give the reward immediately. You can start holding off and elongating the amount of time that you're requiring them to practice that independence before they get that reward. Mm-hmm. But that's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And also what really I took note of, what you said, is independence and confidence. Those are two things that we can tell that Jake doesn't have. I mean, he acts like he's Mr. Tough Guy, bossing everybody around, but he's so clingy, like you can't even go from here to there and not have to follow you. And so I'm going to continue also to reward the behavior of any time he's kind of like doing his own thing and he's being his own man and disconnected from that cord that's so closely tied all the time. That's great too.
Yeah. And so that then kind of leads me into that there are some preventative things that you can do as well. I don't think that it helps fully. Like you're not doing the best service to the dog and setting them up enough for success if you're only dealing with the problem in the moment that the problem is occurring. Mm-hmm. Because in that moment, Jake is feeling anxious. Obviously he's got some insecurities and he's feeling needy, and that's a harder time to do the training. That's more like damage control. What do I do when the behavior is actually happening? But to answer the question of how do I fix this behavior, there has to be a conversation about how to prevent it in the first place and how to teach the dog how to be a better, confident, independent dog in general. So that brings up how to teach two different things. Number one, we want to teach the dog how to be more independent. And number two, we want to teach him how to have control of his impulses. Because that's what barking is. It's a symptom of an impulse control issue. He is having a feeling and he's responding to it immediately instead of taking a second to take a breath and think before reacting. That's what barking is. That's what jumping is. Those are all impulse control kind of reactions in dogs. So if I first want to increase his ability to control his impulses, stay is the number one way to do that. Teaching a sit stay, a down stay, a wait is a version of stay, but anything that creates hesitation before reward, anything at all. And I like stay the most, starting with something really, really small, like can I just put you in a stay and take a step back, and increasing to being able to do these long-term stays where your dog's in a downstay while you're eating lunch, or your dog's in a downstay while you're watching TV. Not only does it create some impulse control in the dog, but it also gives them a job to do, which, directly, sort of contradicts the job that they were attempting to have in order to get the reward of attention. So that one's a big one. The creating impulse control and giving the dog an alternate job to do. And then the other one is creating independence. And something that I think is undervalued when it comes to training a new dog, especially new rescues, because they tend to be, I don't know what Jake's history is, but rescues tend to be a lot more needy because they've had some hopping around in their lives and a little bit too much change. Dogs aren't a fan of change. They like routine and schedule. Is tethering. It's so simple, but tethering in the house, not to you, but to a piece of furniture. Mm-hmm. So teaching the dog that sometimes you're going to be stuck here and I'm going to move away from you. And you can start really, really small with this. And, eventually, it would be great if you could tether the dog and be able to leave and make lunch in the other room and come back. But that's not where you start, because in that situation, if Jake barks, what are you going to do about it? So instead you start with something really small where you tether him and then you just stand up, give a treat, stand up, give a treat, stand up and take, turn your shoulder, give a treat, and kind of see where the dog is and start teaching the dog slowly that it is beneficial to you when I move away. We do want to get to the point where there's some really cool tools out there that can separate you from the one that has to give the reward. There's actual remote treat dispensers that are super awesome that you can just stick right next to the dog, and every time you move away, boop.
Huh.
Yeah. And that's super helpful. And then eventually you can get to the point where you tether them and just give them like a stuffed Kong or something while and eventually you don't need treats at all. So there's a process to it, but the bottom line is teaching the dog how to be by themselves is going to help with that scenario.
Definitely.
So and then of course there's exercise, but I want to pause and see if anybody has any questions or anything on that.
Yeah, no, it's great, Zoe. Thank you. And it makes so much sense. Like every time I speak with you, it just is almost, and maybe some of our viewers are feeling this too. Like, it's like, oh yeah, well, that's kind of obvious, but yet let me just be the person that then is feeling, first of all, I probably like everybody else, that we just don't see it when it's in front of us. Sometimes I know that for me, I'll get like too logical about it and think more like a human probably than like a dog. And you help us to see it from the dog's perspective.
Right.
So for all of our viewers that are jumping on now, if you are just joining us, this is Zoe Sandor. She is the owner of the Pack Method Prep School for dogs down in San Diego and Pacific Beach. She's an amazing dog trainer. She is the one to really help us in some of these
sometimes more complex situations. I know she's had lots of very difficult dogs, but sometimes just the day-to-day too. These are the tips that we're talking about today that I think all of us struggle at some level with our dog being overreactive or too needy sometimes or lacking independence. So we are open for your questions as well. We'll keep sharing, and we have more that we kind of want to get into, but let's hear from you and hear any questions that you might have. Please type them in below. I want to say hello to Christine, who's with us, and Yvette, and Rachel, Deborah.
Hi, Mom.
Oh, is that your mom? Always nice to
My
have
mom's
on. Good job, Mom, supporting the daughter. My mom should be on here anytime now, too. And Kate's such a great supporter, and she's so good when she's in our Facebook Lives because she really helps us to kind of recap in her comments. It's great. So nice to see you, Kate. So she said, great tips to redirect then reward. It takes consistency, and Zoe has great tips to offer. Yes, she sure does. So again, if any of you have questions or just, let us know that you're here, where you're watching from. But if you're challenged with your dog, of course, sometimes it's a bigger conversation, as you heard in the beginning. If we were just to say, my dog barks too much, there's a lot of follow-up questions to that. So be as specific as you can, but get some tips now from this doggy genius. You might as well. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, or kind of seeing if there's anything, well, here's one already, so we might as well take it. But we do have I have another question for you. So Nicole is saying, what methods should I do? Well, let me put it up, actually. What?
Well, it says, what methods should I do with my puppy who, if I'm having a conversation, he'll start a high-pitched, incessant bark until I stop barking? And I think you meant until you stop talking. But maybe your dog does think that's barking. That's actually really, is it okay?
Yeah.
That's really common. It's really common for dogs to start the reactivity when their owner gets on the phone too. And so I don't know if you meant on the phone or just starting to talk to a person. But my feeling is that there are different motivations behind that. And knowing more about the dog as a whole would help me kind of determine exactly what that dog's particular motivation is. But sometimes, and I know this is true for myself, when I'm talking to, when I'm just having kind of a normal conversation with someone in my family, that's one thing. But when I'm talking on the phone, or if I'm talking to a friend that's over, my voice changes. And the thing that I know for sure that happens, and this just happened when I was on the phone with Amanda last night, but my baby wakes up in the other room. Only when I'm talking on the phone or talking. So if I'm talking to my husband, no problem. If I'm talking to my son, no problem. But if I'm talking on the phone or if I'm talking to a guest, my voice changes. And I believe that the arousal level is affected. You're more animated, you're a little more excited, even at an imperceptible amount of increase in arousal. So your dog, however, would be especially sensitive to those slight increases in arousal. And depending on the breed of your dog, some dogs are even more susceptible to those changes. So that could be part of what's causing this to be the moment that they decide to start barking. Another thing that tends to be part of it is that is the moment that their owner's not paying attention to them anymore. Like they know, oh, suddenly I'm not, suddenly my owner's not watching. And so now I'm going to go be reactive at the window, where when my owner is paying attention, I know that they're going to come correct me. So I don't bark as much. So that's another reason sometimes when they start it up right when there's a conversation. So not sure what Nicole's dog's motivation is, but those are some possibilities. Mm-hmm. How to fix the problem is to set up that scenario. So you said, as soon as I'm having a conversation, so I don't know if that's with someone in person or with the phone, but regardless, set up the scenario as a training session. So call, if it's on the phone, call someone that, text them and say, like, I'm going to call you. This is not a real conversation. Also, by the way, I don't know if the dog is reacting. If it's a phone call, sometimes they can react to the sound that's coming out of the phone if they're especially sound sensitive. So it could be the other person's voice. But regardless, set them up and have little tiny conversations. So, hi, treat. How's it going? Treat. You wouldn't believe what happened to me today. Treat. And I would go back to the same thing of using the timeout for corrections. Now, this is assuming that the dog is barking at her. It says he'll start a high-pitched bark, but I wasn't sure if it was barking at Nicole or barking at something in the environment. But assuming he's barking at you, the timeout is still the best sort of correction to give to stop the barking. But the most important thing is really setting up those scenarios instead of expecting to be able to do the training in real time when you're trying to have a conversation with someone, because that's really difficult. And you can set up those scenarios multiple times a day so that by the time you are having a conversation, a real conversation, that you have set your dog up for success. And I would not forget the power of management. When it comes to dog training and dog trainers, when we talk about management, we're talking about preventing the problem from ever happening. And instead of modifying the behavior, we're talking about preventing the behavior. So if you haven't got to a point where your dog can handle a conversation, look for ways to prevent them from having that. So putting them in the other room with a delicious frozen stuffed Kong when you know you're about to have a conversation can be helpful in the meantime while you're still trying to modify that behavior.
Yeah, so they don't, it reminds me of with Jake too, so that they don't have that constantly elevated state. We talked about that last night, right? When dogs are just in such a reactive place where before Jake came here, I think he was barking pretty much all day, every day. Yeah. So you could tell at first that's exhausting. Yeah. As much as it's his doing, he's creating that for himself. It's also obvious to see that the guy is pooped out. Like he just can't take it anymore. His stress hormones were on peak. And so I think just getting them away from it, as you said, managing the situation so they don't even have that heightened experience can then just bring them into that calm state, which was another recommendation you gave to me, was just give him the experience of calm, whether it's massage or meditation or just time together in ease, but like real deep rest. Give them that opportunity. On the flip side, don't give them that constant trigger that's going to take them out of that rest. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, we have a few more questions here. Let me bring the couple more up. And I was just going to mention that Nicole is from our training, our course that we have right now going. We have our 6-week online course, Total Wellbeing for Dogs, happening this week. The theme is training. So that's why it's so perfectly timed. And a few of the other students are on here as well. So let's see. Let me just go back down here a little bit. Gail says, let me pull up Gail's here. Oh, why is that not working?
There you go. While you're pulling that up, I just noticed that Nicole asked if he barks at dogs and wants to play. Do I give a correction for that? And I just want to say, I allow a little bit of barking during play. Excessive, constant barking, like if you have a hound dog or some of the terriers, that is something that, it all comes down to the arousal level. But I think I do have a difference in my expectations of the way the dog interacts with dogs and the way the dog interacts with me. And there's barking during play, and then there's barking at dogs that are playing. And that is two different things. Mm-hmm. Two different things. Barking at dogs when they're playing is the same as alert attention barking. And yeah, that should be corrected. But barking during play, like we're playing and then I stop and I bow. And then I play and then I stop. That I tend to allow.
Yeah, it's part of their natural behavior because you don't want to squelch them. Training is not about squelching. I think that's a misunderstanding. It's not about getting them to be submissive and do what we say. It's about elevating them to be, like you said, confident, independent dogs that get it. They get how to play. They get how to be with people. They get how to greet strangers. They get how to be calm when you're on the phone, and therefore they're living their best life. They're not suppressed, because also that can result in imbalances in the body, just like human beings that suppress themselves emotionally. So I think it's a beautiful technique that you have to allow them to be who they are.
So Gail says, couldn't you just say, what a good boy with a pet when he is being good as a reward or a favorite toy instead of constantly using food as the reward?
Yeah, such a great question. Thank you, Gail. It depends. Yes, absolutely. But it depends on the dog. So my method of training is to try to get the dog successful as quickly as possible, because I think that that's the least stressful for the dog. So I'm not going to withhold food as a reward if the food is what's going to get the dog to the response faster without terribly increasing the dog's arousal level. There are some dogs that are so food motivated that putting food into the mix, especially putting it in as often as we do for training, increases their arousal level, which is the opposite of what I'm trying to do. And in that case, yes, I would definitely use something else. Probably I would just go to affection. And then, of course, on the other side of that, there are dogs that are not food motivated at all. And if they're not food motivated at all, we have to find something else. And in those instances, absolutely, a tug toy is a really common reward that is used for working dogs who are more driven by games and by activity than they are by food. And then also affection for the companion dogs that are more driven by affection and attention than by food. So yeah, I use food to accent what I want if that works for the dogs. But it's not necessary. It wouldn't be my chosen route with every single dog, since they're all different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've experienced that with my big dog, Violet, who I've been training just in general to, she's new in our life, but also we're hoping that she becomes a therapy dog. And what we found quickly, especially when she got nervous in the training facility, because we go there, she didn't want to eat anything, but my voice, praise at first, but then we realized my voice, I would do all these fluctuations and she would just suddenly the tail's back up again and she's excited. And we've also used the positive reinforcement at the end of every training session. We bring in a friend now, this one guy that she really likes, and she's big and he's bigger, so they can like wrestle around. At the end of the experience, when she had, after her 45 minutes of training, then we bring him in, and that has changed things a lot, because that whole facility now has a better energy for her because it's associated with play versus here.
And I think that's a really good point too, about ending on a positive note, is that training sessions should be very short and should leave your dog wanting more. And with you bringing the friend over at the end of the training session, that's really what the dog remembers the most, is what happened in the last 5 minutes of your training session. So if in the last 5 minutes of your training session, they're having a fantastic time and then you stop, the next time that you start your training session, they're going to be even more motivated to participate in that. So it's really important not to push your dog like, oh, they're doing great, let me go to the next step. Until they've already had multiple successes at that current level.
Great insight. I really did not realize that before, and now see it so strongly in Violet. Okay.
I also want to add that if you are using foods as a reward, you can fade them off. So a lot of people think that they don't want to use foods as a reward because then they'll be stuck on food forever. And that's just not true. Not if you're doing it correctly. Dogs you use the food every single time to teach the behavior. And once the behavior is known in every environment, around every distraction. So let's say we're talking about sit, and now your dog can do sit on slippery surfaces, on carpet, on grass, on dry grass and wet grass, inside, outside. And now your dog can do sit everywhere. Then you should start fading down the food rewards. You still use your verbal rewards, but you start fading off the food rewards intermittently. Intermittent rewarding has been proven to actually increase the dog's motivation for the activity itself. Dogs like to gamble. So if we won every single time, gambling, that's not what makes gambling fun, right? What makes gambling fun is are we going to win? Is this the time? Is this the chance that, is this the one where I'm going to get the treat? That's what gives people that sort of addiction to gambling. And dogs love to gamble. So once you teach them the behavior with the reward every time, switch to intermittent rewards. So vary the rewards, not regular, so not like every other time. They'll figure that pattern out. No patterns, just kind of irregular. And that will get you to the point where then you can start slowly fading off of treats altogether.
Gosh, brilliant. Brilliant. So insightful, so helpful. So let's hear from Christine. She has a question here. My 18-month-old neutered Swiss Mountain Dog has had extensive training since he was a pup. He was very scared of every object and was the little guy of his litter. We've taught him the basics. He earned his good citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And extra commands for fun. Always loves those big dog puzzles, and we play a lot of games. We didn't have more. It cut off there. Maybe it comes back. Oh, yeah, here we go. Let's put this one up. The rest of it. He's had training, herding sheep and scent training, but even with all the trust we've built, he has separation anxiety when I'm not in the same room with him. We've tried many things over several months, but it's gotten worse now that I've started working from home. What do you suggest?
So I found with those dogs, I think we can't ignore sometimes the aspect of genetics, and there's a lot of things that are kind of coming into this equation. And one of those, of course, is that you said that he's the little guy of the group and that he's always been very needy. And dogs do have specific temperaments. So with all the training in the world, not all the dogs are going to suddenly be the same. If all dogs are trained perfectly, they don't end up with the same personality. They're still going to have, just like people, there's some people that are more codependent and there's some people that are more independent. And so what we can do is try to get him, just increase the confidence as much as possible. And when you work from home, that does make it difficult because then you have to, and this is, what's funny is that this is the same with people, with parents that work from home, right? I mean, if you know any moms that are stay-at-home moms, that connection with their kids is something that is extreme and that they have to work towards, pushing the kid out of the nest a lot of times, because, the kid is so used to them being around all the time, and which is the opposite for, me. I work outside of the home, and every time I come home, I'm working on kind of creating more of that codependence, and the same is with the dog. So it is difficult when you have a codependent dog and you work from home, so you're there all the time. So there are some things that you can do, and it's just really looking for ways to have someone else for your dog to depend on. So I don't know, I think it was Christine's exact situation. Hi, Christine. But if you have someone else that lives in the home, having them take over a lot of the dog's care is extremely helpful. So the two most helpful would be having them be the ones that walk the dog, having them be I'm not talking about the most helpful, and I'll get to that because it's really hard. But the second and third thing would be having them walk the dog and having them feed the dog. With a dog like that, that's very codependent though, having the primary person freeze them out a little bit of affection and having someone else be giving more of that affection can be extremely helpful in dividing that dependence from one person to my people, my family. It's so hard to do, so I hate giving that assignment. Sometimes that is the assignment that's needed. So creating some separation between the main caretaker and the dog can help them create some more independence. And it can also be meaning if the dog sleeps in bed with you, having them start to sleep either on the floor in a crate, or if they sleep in the bedroom with you, having them sleep outside the bedroom in a crate. We're not trying to shun the dog. We're not trying to take them away from their pack, but we are trying to find moments where we can teach them that they're going to survive not being with me all the time. I would probably recommend the tethering too, if she hasn't tried that, though she may have already. And then I would also recommend outside social activities. So there's all kinds of different ways you can do that. It depends on the dog's sociability, but it could be simple as a dog walker, or it could be even more like a daycare or an excursionist coming and taking the dog out so that they have experiences outside the home. So that if you're not leaving because you're working from home, at least the dog is leaving and getting some experiences outside the home as well.
Mm-hmm. That's very good. And And so, logical too, again, I know I keep saying that, but it really helps us to define or to understand the patterning and the way in which the canine brain works. And again, sometimes we humans don't think of it, or just are, I think, distracted with our lives very oftentimes, and are preoccupied. And now these kind of conversations can bring us back into some of those tangible things that we can do today, because training is every day. Like you said, you're not just sending the dog off somewhere and comes back done and now we're good the rest of our lives. Just like a child or any of us, we didn't stop learning. Look at us, we're still learning right here. So that has to continue.
A few little tidbits just about that last comment would be, first of all, sports are very confidence building. So kudos for doing the scent training and the sheep herding, and kind of accessing your dog's instincts in that way can be very supportive for confidence. You can use the scent training. If he was really into it, I would use that and start playing find it games at home, always in the room that you are not. So hiding all the treats, putting your dog in a stay, hiding all the stuff, and going, okay, find it, and you walk out of the room while your dog finds all the treats. So that can be something, if your dog is really into that, where you can bring that into the home and use it to create that space and to create some positive association with being separated from mom. So that is one thing I wanted to mention. And I had a second one, but I lost it, so I may have to come back to it.
I think that would help a lot with Jake as well, with the independence. We do have, let's see, let's try this question. It takes us kind of to a different part of training. Rescued a male dachshund and fixed him, but still urinates and marks after walking him outside. I do have a 7-year-old female Papillon also. Yeah, what to do with the marking?
Urinates and marks after walking him outside. And I'm assuming, Adeline, what you mean is he's being inside the house. So first of all, I think this is this kind of brings up a topic that means a lot to me, in that I do not advocate using neutering as a way to modify behavior, because it is rare that it is the actual cause of the behavior and will actually fix the behavior in and of itself. So
good to hear that, Zoe, because a lot of people are confused about that, and I hear it all the time, and then disappointed when nothing changes.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. So we really hope, I think there, you can. It's so hard because just like as a human parent, we're getting advice from so many different places, and it's hard to know, what's the right advice. And that is still some advice that is being given out there, is, as like as the first step in the solution, because neutering is kind of thought of as this, like, no big deal. Like, your dog's humping, neuter them, fix it up, like that's your problem. But in my experience as a trainer, I have not seen enough of a correlation between the intact nature of a male dog and these behaviors. It does. I mean, not enough of a correlation for it to be the first go-to ahead of training. So, however, because this Dalmatian has been neutered, we know that is not the cause for the urinating and the marking inside. So at least we can eliminate that as a possibility. So that's great. And I didn't see, and if Adeline, I don't know if she can pop in real quick, but I didn't see how old this dog is. And that is something that might affect my recommendation. However, marking inside is and because, by the way, guys, because the age it indicates where they are in their maturity, and depending on where they are in their maturity, there can be more of this like testosterone burst thing happening, and making them want to mark on everything. Some dogs kind of keep that forever, but some dogs it's more of a phase, and so I would be curious to know how old this Doxy is. However, marking outside of those reasons is another impulse control issue. I smell it, I have the feeling that maybe I want to pee on it, and I do. Same as barking, same as jumping. It's the same. And so the first thing that I would do is start teaching your dog, even when they're on their walks, to start conserving their urine and just peeing once or twice on a walk instead of allowing them to just pee all over. Especially dogs that mark a lot, it means that they are consciously saving their urine for the next place for them to pee. And that's not so helpful if they're saving it and then peeing inside. The other side of that is, what do I do when they do pee inside? And there's a few different what we're dealing with in that situation. If it's all marking, it's not necessarily a housebreaking issue, because it's not that the dog doesn't know where to go. It's that they're not really respecting the house as a place that they live in. Oh my gosh. As I'm talking right now, guys, I have like a million questions. So this is what I'm hesitating to answer this, because I want to know, what does the pee look like? Like, is he lifting his leg? Is it going up the wall, or is it actually happening on the floor? What room is it happening in? Is it happening in the room that he sleeps? Is it happening in his crate? Is it happening in the room where he eats? And then I'd also want to know, is it happening at certain times, like when he goes over to a friend's house or when a dog comes over to his house? Is the 7-year-old female Papillon, I'm assuming that's what you meant by that, is that dog incontinent and having any issues peeing inside? Or is it just that that dog exists? Because just the existence of that dog should not be causing pee from this dachshund. So there's a lot that goes into a potty issue. And so it's not really necessarily a quick fix. If I were to give a quick fix answer, it would be constant supervision. The dog is not sort of given the opportunity to have any freedom whatsoever until the peeing stops. So there should be no freedom inside the house at all. Either the dog is in a crate or leashed to you the entire day. And so that you can catch all the accidents and give a correction, maybe just like a hey with a hand clap, and immediately take them outside and go potty. Every time they go potty outside, they should be getting a reward. We should be limiting the potties outside so that they're only peeing like twice, so that we're saying, get it all out now, buddy, because you're not going to have the opportunity inside. And those would be, and then if you are having a really hard time catching it, sometimes the use of a belly band or like a male diaper can be helpful to at least decrease the urinating in the house, so that you can redo your carpets or something if they're starting to get real rank, and then start creating that. Some dogs will not pee when that's on them because they're like, I have something on me, and then you can create the space between urinations by just keeping that on. Some dogs do pee in the diaper, and in that case, it's just saving your furniture. It's not necessarily helping with the training itself. So sort of a convoluted answer to that one, but hopefully you can see there's kind of a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, well, like we mentioned last night, it's like when I talk to one of my clients and they'll say, my dog's foot is itching, like all she's doing is itching her foot. What's wrong? And so there's this whole list of questions that I would need to ask to try to figure out, is this behavior? Is it physical? Is there something in the paw? All the other things. So we certainly understand the need for more backup, kind of larger picture information. But your answers, like your sharing, has been great in showing us the differences and why we need to ask those questions, and that it matters. So before we finish up, Zoe, I would love, one thing that we've talked about and I talk about very often with clients is the need for more exercise for our dogs. I think most dogs, I don't know the statistic, maybe you have one, but I would say most dogs, at least half, are not exercised enough and therefore are exhibiting some sort of unfavorable behavior because of that. So before we close up, will you just share with us 1 or 2 ways that you suggest people get some exercise with their dogs? And actually, I'll just mention that yesterday when I said that I've been walking Jake, you shared that although walking's great, there's still like all this resistance being built. So walking sometimes is not serving the purpose that we think. So share with us your thoughts on exercise.
Yeah. So the first thing that you need to take into consideration when you're figuring out how you should exercise your dog, is their breed and then also their age. So if they are under 18 months, they should not be going on long runs with you. So a lot of people are like, they get these really high energy dogs, and this is such a struggle, and I know it is, but a lot of people get these really high energy dogs, and then they're like, no problem, I'll just take them on a bike ride, or I'll take them on a skateboard, or I'll take them on my I'm training for a marathon, I'm going to take them with me on these runs. I'm like, not until they're a year and a half, my friend, because they are still developing their bones, and that's a super high, it is an impact sport, the running part of it. So I think that taking them on jogs and runs and stuff is awesome. But make sure that they're the appropriate age so that you're not going to hurt, that you still have longevity in their physical self. And then their breed, take that into consideration. Absolutely. So if I had a border collie, for example, and I was like, I don't know why my dog is never tiring out. I take my dog on a jog every day, because my dog's over a year and a half, I would say, yeah, that is the most boring activity you could possibly choose. And there is not nearly enough mental stimulation in that to actually tire your dog out. There has to be a combination of thought process in it when it comes to the higher intelligence breeds. So a long walk for a Frenchie or a bulldog is going to be perfect. But for a working dog, it's probably not going to really do the trick, even if you're doing it multiple times a day. So sports like some of our people were getting into are huge. Specifically the sports that your dog was bred to do are going to be significantly more mentally exhausting. We do something called six-pack wags, or we call like six-pack abs or pack Pilates at Pack Method Prep, which is a class which is intricate sort of core workouts for dogs that is way more exhausting than going on a walk. So and then swimming. God, I love swimming. Swimming is so great. If your dog is a water dog, like that is one of the best exercises for them. Super exhausting. You have to be careful of the water quality and all that stuff that goes into it. But I think that the first thing you do is think about your dog and what they need the most, and then go from there. That's the best jumping off point. I would also say that a combination of different things is also the best way to go. So if I have a border collie, my dog's probably going to get walked twice a day. My dog's also going to probably go herding 1 or 2 times a week. And then my dog's also going to get trained at home, mental games, as many as I can do every single day. And then my dog's also going to socialize and play with dogs, because that's a really good exercise too. So, but keeping that combination varied keeps your dog balanced. So with leash walking and jogging, that's a very controlled behavior, and you're reinforcing some impulse control while your dog is getting exercise. With dog wrestling, your dog is getting their yah-yahs out, crazy, but they're not really practicing any impulse control because they don't have to, because they're in their element. If you only do one or the other, you may not be servicing your dog to the extent that they need. So if I think we're talking about Jack is only getting walks, for a terrier, that's probably not enough. He probably needs a flirt pull to play tug, something where he can go a little bit nuts to get some of that high anxiety that working dogs have out of their system. And then the opposite is also true, like especially if you have a dog like a pit bull. If their primary activity is wrestling and playing with other dogs, you are probably dealing with a pretty rowdy dog that needs balance on the other side of that with some exercise that incorporates control.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're amazing at summarizing and really giving us so much in such a short amount of time, Zoe, because like we said, I know that there's
layers upon layers. These aren't simple questions. And yet these ideas, many of what you just mentioned, I've never even thought of. And the combination of them all. It's not just about that one walk or the one run or the one time at the park, but really, involving the mind and combining so many great tools. So thank you very much for all of that. If you would like to learn more from Zoe, which I would highly recommend, I couldn't recommend more, here's her website, packmethodprep.com. You can go there, learn more about the facilities. Zoe, do you consult with anybody like that are not in the San Diego area? How can they learn from you?
Yeah. You mean if they call it?
Yeah, call.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. We do phone consultations, meaning, every client that calls in gets a full sort of, let me hear about your whole issue. Let me figure out what's best for you with me or one of my trainers. And then we kind of decide. So we have quite a few different services. We have the preparatory school, like I talked to you about in the beginning. We also have private in-home lessons and group classes. And depending on your dog's issue and also how you want to go about fixing that issue will kind of help us determine which of those services is right for you. So yeah, the phone consultation is key.
Great. Yeah, because obviously you're able to share a lot with us this way too, without even seeing our dogs. And that's amazing. So thank you so much again for taking your time today, for your willingness to share with our community and to just help so many dogs around the world and be so devoted to that. We love you and we appreciate you, Zoe.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you all for being on today. Thanks, Tina, for being here, and Katie and Deborah and Adeline and all of our wonderful friends. Thank you for your feedback and comments. I'll keep my eyes in here. And if there's anything that we want to be able to address or need to be able to address, I can always get in touch with Zoe as well. But feel free to reach right out to her. She's an amazing resource, as you know. So thank you all for being with us. We'll be back again with you next week, as always, 10 a.m. Pacific time, Saturday morning. And have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Bye for now, everyone. Someone just commented, Zoe is a rock star. I agree. Zoe is a rock star. Bye, everyone. Thank you again.